Welcome everyone to our webinar today, part of our Silent Deal Killers series, 5 common pricing mistakes. So my name is Sarah and I'm part of the content team here at Quiller, and I will be moderating our session today. Just a few housekeeping notes to get us started. First of all, we are recording this session. And we encourage you to chat in your questions or your pricing examples that you'd like reviewed in our session tomorrow. We will be taking a look at select submissions and giving you feedback, as well as allowing you a time to ask our pricing expert in our session tomorrow at 4:30 Eastern Time. Okay, let's go ahead and meet our speakers. So I'm just going to turn off my stop share here so we can see our speakers a little bit bigger. So first off, we have Patrick Campbell. Patrick is the founder and CEO of ProfitWell, the suite of tools that plug right into your subscription management system and provide turnkey solutions to reducing your churn, optimizing your pricing, and ensuring your revenue recognition is audit-proof. ProfitWell's flagship metric products also powers the subscription financial metrics for over 20,000 subscription companies. And by the way, it is free and it takes less than 5 minutes to set up. No joking. That's right. Prior to ProfitWell, Patrick led strategic initiatives for Boston-based Gemvara and was an economist at Google and the US intelligence community. So Patrick, welcome. We are delighted that you are here today.
Thanks for having me. I want to bring you around every day for that intro. That was great.
Yeah. And Patrick, what part of the world are you calling from?
Normally I'm in Utah, but I am in Boston right now where our headquarters is. So I get a little West Coast, quote unquote, little East Coast. So obviously Utah's not on the coast, but that's the joke.
Great.
Good deal.
And would you tell us a little bit more about ProfitWell, please?
Yeah, I think you said a lot. I think the basic idea is we're in the business of subscription growth and automating that. And so our whole thesis is we have this free subscription metrics product. You can plug in Stripe, Recurly, Zoro, whatever you're using, and get access to all of your subscription financial metrics. And then the way that we make money, and that's where we have 20,000 plus companies using it. The way we make money is we study all of that data, and then the kind of data as well as the learnings train our algorithms to basically build products that optimize your pricing or lower your churn automatically. So our retained product, you just plug it in, automatically saves you credit card failures and cancellation flows. And then our pricing product, we basically help with monetization and things like that. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. I think I don't think I ever thought I'd learn more about credit cards and pricing than I ever wanted to in my life. But you know what? That's the game. You don't pick your love picks you. So that's been a good time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I love all the data that you're collecting. It makes for some fascinating research and some great insights that we're going to hear more about today too. So welcome, Patrick. Delighted to have you. Now let's meet our second speaker, Mark Tanner. Mark is the co-founder and COO at Quiller, the visual proposal tool for the modern world, allowing both sellers and buyers to have an excellent sales experience. At Quiller, Mark leads the go-to-market teams across sales, marketing, customer experience, and ops. And before Quiller, Mark ran strategic partnerships for Google in ANZ and New York. Working on global deals with large media companies for both Android and search. So Mark, welcome. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's very, very nice to be here. Hello, everybody.
All right. And Mark, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Would you please share more about Quiller?
Sure. I'll be brief, everybody, but the basic idea behind Quiller, I suppose the really big idea behind Quiller is that files suck in the age of the web, like Word, PowerPoint, PDF. These are all tools that were created in the 80s and 90s. Like older word processors existed before then, and they're fundamentally not they don't work with the web, right? Like there's no way for them to be interactive, to move data about, to be interesting. But yet the vast majority of companies, when they communicate with their customers, are still largely relying on either email or Word, PowerPoint, PDF as the main tools. And so Quiller's whole thesis is that this should just be a web page. So we're a way for you to communicate with your customers really easily and beautifully, and like in a way that you can automate and have be personalized, get analytics, etc., with the power of the web. So your proposals, quotes, pitch decks, presentations can be beautiful, interactive Quiller pages. So yeah, get rid of those junk old PDFs and come on over to the future. And there's a whole bunch of fun things you can do over there. Pitch done.
If I can, I'll brag about you guys for a second. What I really, there's a lot of products in the wider space that Quiller's in, but what I love about Quiller is that it's beautiful by default. And that's like a really interesting, like the first time I met Mark talked a lot about like, not everyone has like design skills, and that's okay. It's just more of like, then let's give them something that's like truly beautiful. And you can see that not only in the company culture, but I think in the actual product, which you can't say about the other folks in the space. And so what I love about Quiller is I'm not a designer, but it makes me look good. So yeah, just a little shameful or shameless plug there for you, since you weren't going to say it. So there you go.
Thank you.
Anyways,
Patrick.
let's talk about pricing.
Let's talk about price.
Let's talk pricing.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, the reason we're all here today is we want to talk about pricing. Obviously, the 5 common pricing mistakes that companies so often mistake, often unaware that there's errors going on. But your pricing and how you present your offer can make or break a deal, and how your sales rep approaches the price often speaks to their confidence about their pricing model too. I know when I was in sales, we were the highest priced solution in the market, and I struggle with that a bit. But there's common areas where our brands miss psychological adjustments that we can make that impact our deal incomes and bottom line. And so today, that's what we want to talk about. A few of the more common mistakes we often see, how you can improve, and how you can close deals at a higher rate. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump in, and let's introduce our first pricing mistake. And, I think this first one is kind of controversial, especially if you're in a highly competitive market. Competing on price is so dangerous and can really have a negative effect on buyer psychology if sellers are throwing out discounts prematurely, which really raises the question, should you discount? So what I want to do is launch a poll and see where our audience is at, and see, do you feel pressured to compete on price? Yes or no? We just want to know where you're at. We want to know, do you regularly discount? Yes or no? And then if you're discounting, what's the average size of the discounts given? There's no, there's not a right or wrong answer here. We just want to know where you're at. It helps our speakers to kind of tailor their responses. So we got things coming in. All right, good. People are voting. Good deal. Good deal.
How would you answer this, Mark?
I think as a rep, look, there definitely can be, I think I actually would say this would evolve for me over time, right? Like early in my career, I'd have different answers to mid-stage, different answers to, I'm quite opinionated on this now, I think, to some degree. But I think that, and then I think as Nicholas just shared in the chat, like there are strategies here, right? Like I think that there's different ways you can use this. Like we have a bit of a policy at Quiller around certain types of discounting having like a bit of an explosion, a bit of a time limit to them. Say, this is available for this period of time and things like that. I do think that can be a crutch, that sort of the discount timeline one. Like, it's end of quarter, here's a discount. Like, we've all been through that part, and I'm not sure that necessarily is that valuable or that sort of useful. I think there are other ways to sort of structure that inside the deck. Anyway, Sarah, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, let's end our poll. And now I'm going to share the results, Okay. All right, so do you feel pressure to compete on price? 84% said yes. Very, very interesting. Do you regularly discount? 58% said yes, and 42% said no. What is the average size of discounts given? 53% said 1 to 15%, 42% said 16 to 30%, and 5% said no discounting is allowed in their company. So Patrick and Mark, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, so we did a study I have strong opinions on this that are kind of driven by, I was a salesperson at one point in my life, but I am not a salesperson by career. And we did a research study of about 8,000 different sales reps in mostly the SaaS and subscription community. And what we found is that it was over 75% basically said that like discountings were important or very important to their job. And the problem wasn't that. The problem was more like the level of discount that they thought that they needed. So that poll was great because mostly everyone was like under 30%. In aggregate, it's typically they wanted more than 50% in terms of like their like discretion. And what we looked at in the data, and this is not research data, this is now like actual like churn data, is basically if you have a customer who receives a discount over 20%, it correlates with a double the churn rate. And what that means is like theoretically, if you're a subscription business, which not everyone is on this call, but I think some of the rules do apply. Like if you're not a discount brand, and that's an exception, like if you're truly like known as a discount brand, you should probably limit your discounting to about 20%. And then if you truly feel like you can't make deals unless you go to 40%, you probably want to take the list price down because that's probably a good indication that your price is off. And the main reason for it is you're getting people who buy just for the discount. And if you're trying to get people to stick around for a subscription for a long time, and the only reason someone bought was a discount, they're going to churn or cancel the product like relatively soon. So I don't know. I think this is one of those things where like it's a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And a lot of people, it's like if you're a salesperson and the only way you can sell stuff is through discounting, like you're probably not doing your job, let alone a company that's their main pricing mechanism. So I don't know. Hopefully I threw some grenades in there. I think Mark, you're gonna agree a lot, but we'll see.
Throw some grenades, mate. Let's try to get. I mean, I think so. On my side, we've had so within our sales reps inside Quiller, we've had a few people who've become like quite radicalized on this. One of our leading reps basically no longer offers a discount for anything other than volume. So there's now like, he will, go up, go and give, discounts if you are, moving towards being a very large deal, or if he can lock you in, volume and extra commitment. So like, 2 years, 3 years, et cetera. And I think one of the things that we went through a session working on this, and we analyzed our average discounting across the team, and then sort of said, okay, well, what can we do to sort of decrease this, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that he sort of experimented with was just like saying, we don't discount as a company. We don't do that. We don't offer discounts unless it's for volume or for scale. This is a very anecdotal thing of one person, but his win rate went up marginally after doing this. And I think like generally you can look at like data across like much larger organizations where they structure this, and they say, if you're not perceived as being, if you don't have that tool in your toolkit, if you remove that as a tool, it forces the rep to go into like other zones of trying to understand, like, I must create value at the price that I have, because I don't have this like kind of cheat code that is the discount. And I think that, in those situations, like being, you sort of pushing that away, you actually do have to lean towards, how am I actually showing this is a fair transaction, like a fair value for what I'm asking to what they're getting. I think there's can be an instinct, like we all have, like we all want to be in the Middle Eastern bazaar having a haggle, trying to find a good price, and there's a nice feeling on that side. But the best reps are able to sort of say like, hey, like actually the real nice feeling is you have a problem, and I'm going to like remove it or reduce it in your life, or something of those sort of things. And I'm going to open up this new opportunity to you. And I think that really honing in on that is the core thing that you sort of want to get to. And so I would say, like, one of the things, again, we did this for a period at Quiller, was like we said, we sort of went to a zone where like the max discount you could give was, I think if we did this for a quarter, was like 5%, which is like quite low. Yeah. And we just sort of tested it out. For most companies, people were quite nervous about it, but actually a bunch of people got semi-radicalized internally about it.
Yeah. For most companies, this is what I make suggestions when just giving off the cuff advice about pricing, is like, just cut your discounting, like ceiling or floor, or however you're measuring it. Just cut it like in half or by a third, and just see what happens. Like, just do that. And most of the time what ends up happening is like, you effectively get an increase in price or an increase in revenue per customer, because, it just makes the salesperson work a little bit harder. And I think to give some really practical tools, I think an urgency discount, like I can't remember, like
Nicholas.
Nicholas was saying, I think like an urgency discount, I think is fine. You know, you got to be careful though, because if they don't use it and then they come back, like, you know, you probably can give a discount, but you probably shouldn't, you know, that type of a thing. With the time base that Mark was talking about. The other things are like what you discount or what you do to provide value is really important. So what our reps will do is like, well, I can't give you a deal on that, but I can give you X for free, or I can give you X at, you know, whatever. And normally that's an add-on or something that brings them into the company or brings them into the product even further. And then if you're more like enterprisey or like the coaching program, I think Nicholas has, is like, there's things that you can discount that are a little bit more one time. Like I always try to protect the recurring or the repeat revenue. Like don't like try to keep that more sacred if you can, and then discount the like onboarding or discounting the like, you know, training session call or whatever it is, because that stuff is, you know, that in the long term, it doesn't matter as much in your lifetime value. But yeah, those are some of the tools I would use. Use an add-on instead, give an add-on, give priority support. We give priority support away like candy here at ProfitWell, because it's like basically our own support anyways. Like our support is already has really high standards. So it's like, oh, we'll give you priority support. And like, we rarely have to like use it because like our volume isn't insane. So yeah, those are some things to think about.
Let me give away a secret for everybody negotiating with a Quiller person on this side. I mean, I think like, I think a similar thing is just like, we have onboarding packages, you know, that cost, you know, some amount of money, you know, up to like a few $1,000s for some. Guess what? If you do them, you're going to have a much better experience with Quiller. You're going to have like your account really well set up, really well, whole team really well trained. And like, you're going to become a better customer for me. So again, when our team goes through this and it's like, look, it is expensive to do, but it's also like, if that's a $2,000 thing that gets discounted by $1,000, we're still feeling great about that. And again, as Patrick says, that's a one-time fee for us, not the recurring revenue part. And the part in SaaS land, you know, I don't care about month one revenue. I care about month 101 revenue. Like you want to have people who stick around, who are happy customers for a long time. Like a really awesome onboarding session that we can fully invest in and go pretty hard on is like a great way to do that. So like go ask for the onboarding discount and go hassle my reps. But I think like, I totally agree with you on that point.
Yeah,
nice.
You know, and Jeff chatted in that, you know, he asked for value in exchange if someone's asking for a discount, which is a great idea. But I think this whole discussion kind of leads into our next mistake, which let me just share that. Which mistake number 2 is one size fits all. You know, and we do have a stat here that 66% of buyers want options and want the ability to right size their package, which I think speaks very clearly to understanding your buyer, their persona, their price sensitivity, you know, and where they're coming from as you approach that pricing discussion. But sometimes presenting just a bottom line price can come across as an ultimatum and maybe scare them off. And so, Patrick, you've done so much research in this area. You've already thrown out a lot of great ideas about discounting. Speak to us now about, you know, what do you do about the one size and the buyer personas?
Yeah, so here, the biggest thing for people to kind of think about is like, not all leads or not all prospects are created equal, right? And truly, like the picture perfect version of this is like dynamic pricing, right? Where every single person, you know perfectly what they're willing to pay and stuff. It's really hard for most businesses to do that. And even then, like you would need a really short sales cycle because you wouldn't want them coming back tomorrow and seeing a different price. And so the way we kind of make this more practical is like, well, what are the big segments or the big types of customers or personas or segments that we're selling to? And I think any company, like you can collect data on this, but you could even just on a very basic level, just in a spreadsheet, like what are the types of buyers across the columns? And then what are the things I know about them? And so it might be small, medium, large, right? It might be, you know, this type of vertical versus that type of vertical. But the important thing is that because there's difference in, you know, personalities, there's differences in people, there's differences in value, people are willing to pay different amounts. And so you want to take advantage of that by just offering other options. I think some of the famous examples, we've seen this, I'm sure, Mark, you've seen this, where all of a sudden you like, you know, not necessarily forget, but you put the tier on the page, then you put another tier next to it, and you think they're going to select the least expensive tier, and then they select the most expensive, and you're like, oh, we agreed on the least one, but all of a sudden they paid for the large one, and we asked if there was a mistake, and they said, oh no, we want the extra stuff, right? And so it's just, you have to offer up those options. And I think for most companies, you ideally want like a tier or one particular price for each major group that you're selling to. And so for most companies early on, it's going to be like 2 to 4 tiers. But even then, if you're like, oh, I only have this one package, like add-ons are one of the most underutilized aspects of all of pricing. Meaning like, yes, like maybe everyone's kind of the same, but again, everyone has a little bit of a different need where, well, one person wants priority support, one person wants better analytics, one person wants extra hours. And so they can buy the joint package, but then maybe they buy an add-on or all the add-ons. And that over time will increase your revenue per customer just by offering options. And so it's a balance. Like you don't want to overwhelm everybody, but it's one of the most powerful things is like, don't have one price because not everyone's the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think the exchange here that you're trying to have is to give, as a buyer, and this sort of gets into the negotiation piece around price as well, the previous topic. Like, we love as humans having agency and having control of our destiny and being able to influence our world. And we can go down a whole philosophical chat about determinism or whatever else if we want to here. But I think like, really we want to have like a feeling of control. And I think that going into something and being like, okay, there are these different parts here, which one feels like the right choice for me? And one of them is like a lower cost option, and one of them is a more sort of, a higher serviced option or a better quality product or longer or whatever it is. And I think giving some sort of structured process around that does give people a feeling of control. It can give some degree of a feeling of like sort of like reciprocity or like fairness in a process. And I think that having that in there that sort of allows your customers sort of have that feeling, that in itself is a good sort of psychological point. The other point here is like, obviously, as Patrick said, like different people have different needs, have different budgets, have different realities. And I think that, yes, you can't have, infinite pricing, per person, but I do think that, you can go and play around with different things to experiment to what works here. And I, certainly you do need the ability to sort of say, hey, there are sort of different cohorts here. The thing I would also say is like, as a buyer, when you're sort of going through and seeing like, multiple different price points, you do need to be thoughtful as to like how you package that, what that means. I think Patrick's right about like, there are add-ons can be like certain things, but there are certain parts of things that like, if you do an add-on where it's like, oh, get customer support with this add-on. It's like, oh, but I need like customer support should be part of the main product. Like I need that. You do need to be sort of thoughtful and careful about how you split those things up. But I think that sort of comes down to common sense to some degree, to sort of how you balance that. But I would sort of say like, you should never offer a product that is like a price point for something that can't live on its own. That makes sense. That can't like be a standalone thing that someone would be genuinely happy with and have a sort of good time with. So then I think you start to edge into, again, you edge away from that zone of fairness and towards a buyer experience where the buyer is like, this person is being reasonable and a good partner in, with me and sort of fair, towards one where it's like they're trying to like scam me and exploit me and get it they can.
I think I'm going to strongly agree, but it's going to come off like I'm disagreeing. But because I think everything you said, I want some spice in this convo, Mark.
Spice.
I think the thing is like, the reason I want to push back is because we overthink fairness when it comes to pricing. And I know that sounds dramatic and it makes me sound like an ass or jerk, professional. It makes me sound like a jerk a little bit, but the reason is not that you shouldn't be fair, but I think what happens sometimes is people, they get into a mindset of like, if I end up charging a customer like 3 times what another customer is, and that customer isn't really getting that much more from my perspective, there's a problem. And that's not exactly what you were saying, but it was, you were being more like, make sure it's aligned towards value, which I totally agree with. But you brought up an interesting point, because I've seen a lot of people like get scared because they're thinking of fairness. And it's funny is like, there are products like, there's this concept called value-based pricing. And value-based pricing is basically like understanding your customer and based on that charging it, right? So I can have the exact same product, right? The exact same product to a T, and I sell it to a startup for
Yeah.
$100 and I sell it to an enterprise company for $10,000. The exact same usage, the exact same everything, right? Now, what a lot of founders and a lot of operators do is they go, oh no, it doesn't feel fair. What if they talk to each other? That type of a thing, right? And this is not what you were saying. So I'm literally being triggered off the word fair and going on a completely different point.
I love it.
Yeah.
Go on the rant.
And so the thing is though, is it's like, well, hold on a second. If it's a compliance product, that we can't measure it, but that enterprise company is definitely getting more value because the risk of compliance is higher, right? If it's a, HR product, there's more people, so theoretically they're getting more value. And so I would just encourage you to not overthink it, right? Like you're gonna know when it's truly unfair. You're gonna know when it's like, oh, we're being jerks, you're gonna know that, but
yeah.
Don't be scared to charge people different amounts of money, because if they're paying it, and this is a very capitalistic statement, if they're paying it, their willingness to pay was there. Now,
yeah,
it's a little more complicated than that, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind. But I think if you always have value in mind and you always have that persona value or that persona pricing fit, I think you'll be fine.
I think that's a good point. I think at the end of the day, I mean, to some degree, it's a simple thing of if this was done to me, how would I feel? And I think as long as you're that's the sort of, I suppose, fairness I'm looking for on that side. There was a company I had a friend of mine who worked for that did e-commerce pricing optimizations. They would scrape various competitor sites and do optimization things. And they charged I think it was 0.25% of gross revenue. Tell us how much we're gonna see, tell us how much you're making. And if you do $1 million a year, we'll charge you based off that. If you're doing $1 billion a year, we'll charge you based off the exact same product. And I think again, the value you get is related to how much things you sell.
It's interesting because you'll see people who so I think we could sit here and be the $1 billion company is getting, they're getting more value because of their size than the smaller company, right? Theoretically. But there are people who look at that and go, that's not fair. That's not fair. And it's just fairness is in the eye of the person making the purchase, right? Now, maybe you're transparent, because if it's 0.25%, you're probably transparent. So if I was $1 million, I'd only pay this. So if I'm $1 billion, I'd pay this. Yep. And if they're cool with it, I think that actually, that's probably where there's common ground here. And I think we're saying a bunch of different things. So I think we actually vehemently agree. But I think if you're transparent with how the pricing is set up, and when the price goes up and the price goes down, you send receipts, you send, very clear communication when pricing changes based on whatever. I think that's where it comes into fairness in those aspects, at least in my mind. And so, but I'm the brash American on the call, so maybe it's a little bit different here.
Good. Yeah, I think Nicholas is agreeing with you. Keep it real. And then Jeffrey chatted in. He loves the tier idea and asked how many is too few, too many, what's the magic number, which we are going to lead right into our next pricing mistake. So I want to just hold on to Jeffrey's question for just a moment, and then I'll ask you to answer it shortly. So let's go into our third pricing mistake, which is overcomplicating your pricing presentation. Simpler is better, and don't make buyers interpret your offer. So with that, we get more into the psychological side of pricing, and I want to launch a poll on this one. Let's see. Okay, so the question is, which price is the lowest? $1,499.00, $1,499, or $14.99. Which price is the lowest? Obviously, this one is pretty straightforward, but please take a moment and vote for us. Okay. Good. Votes are coming in. Great. And it's not clear cut, which is even better. Good deal. I love it when that happens. Good. Please take a moment and vote. Yep. About half of you have voted. Let's see if we can get a few more in. Good. Good. They're coming in. All right. Okay. I'm going to close it off. So if you're itching to vote, this is your last chance. And very good. Oh, I love it. We've got some diversity here. So let me share the results. We had 6% vote for option number one, which, yeah, thank you. 39% said option number two, very interesting. And 56% said option number three, the $14.99. Now, according to the Journal of Consumer Psychology, they would say the right answer is C, $14.99 with no commas or decimals. And the reason is because when we say it out loud, and that's why I spoke the price to you, when it's fewer syllables, then we perceive it to be a lesser amount. So, Patrick, Mark, any comments on this one?
Yeah, Mark, what do you got? I'll let you go first this time.
I mean, I think the thing for me here is just like, I think speaks to how funny humans are. Human beings are weird. Like we pretend to be these like perfectly rational beings. We pretend to sort of go into pricing and think that like, you know, Patrick's an economist, like all economists, you know, not all economists, but a bunch of economists have, you know, these sort of models of how humans should behave. And you can sort of be like, well, you know, basis. And obviously on many things, they're broadly right, but it's like on the individual level, human beings are odd. Like there are weird psychological triggers. There are things people have that sort of go through and feel cheaper or feel better or feel right. There's this sort of idea, I'm certain Patrick will actually know this answer rather than me half scraping through it, but it's like, you know, with pricing priming, because we in most, well, certainly in English speaking countries read from left to right. If you show your most expensive pricing, so most people go like free on far left, you know, and then cheap price middle and then expensive price on the right. But if you flip it around and do expensive price first and then get cheaper, it actually primes them by seeing the expensive price first. And, you know, but there's all these things you can do, but it's all, I think all that shows to me is that human beings are weird and that there's a lot of strange psychology that goes into pricing. And that I think that we can sometimes treat this as being a purely rational affair, and pricing can be emotional. And I actually think that this maybe ties back to like Patrick's, this sort of, you know, argument / non-argument we were having before about fairness, which is like, fairness is like, I think fairness is like, you know, that's like, that sort of can be an emotional thing as much as it can be sort of a rational thing. You know what I mean? Whether you sort of feel on that sort of side. So I suppose like that's my first comment is just like the strangeness of human beings.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting, so you're 100% right. I think what's really interesting, so like another one that you didn't mention is so J.C. Penney did one of the original studies on this in like the 1910s, like very, very long time ago, where they took two buckets of goods, the exact same good, and one of them was 2 for 50% off, and one of them was 2 for 1. Same price, basically the same price. Any guesses as to which one won? Which one was used more?
2 for 1?
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yep. So 2 for 1, like by a large margin won. And the reason is typically, and this study's been replicated for many, many years. The reason that exists is because we as humans, we don't necessarily understand percentages as well as we understand whole numbers. Now, like obviously you understand a percentage and you can think about it, but it takes an extra second than like 2 for 1. Okay, I get that right away. 2 for 50% off. Like you kind of have to think, okay, you know, it's basically buy one get one free, right? And there have been a lot of these studies, right? And I think Macy's or J.C. Penney did another study where if you end your prices in 9s, kind of like what we were talking about, it's a discount brand where if you ended in 0 or 5, you're thought of as luxury, right? And this is why when you go to a high-end jeweler, all of the prices end in 0s or 5s, or even Gilt, which was like a luxury good at a discount company, all of the before prices end in 0s or 5s, all of the after prices end in 9s. So here's the thing though, these are true. You can get studies that show this. You can get studies and examples that show you the most expensive price on the left is better than the least expensive price on the left. It's just your mileage is going to vary a lot. And so I think that what I like to tell people is like, one, don't overcomplicate it as you're saying in this slide, but also like these are kind of like the last 5% optimizations. if you don't know who your customer is, if you don't know your right packaging, the number of tiers, all the other stuff we've been talking about, this isn't going to save you, right? This isn't going to like all of a sudden be amazing. And I bet you if we like took your pricing page and did one of these like psychological tricks, some of you would see, oh, it went up, but really it was something else in your business. It really wasn't that. And some of you wouldn't work at all, right? And so I would test these things, but only after you've done some of the legwork on it. But it is fascinating. It definitely shows how weird we are as humans.
Yeah. So I'm going to interrupt you guys as you're chatting here, but I want to get to a real life example. So this is a actual example of a proposal and the offer presented to Quiller, and we've excluded the company name intentionally. You know, we don't want to embarrass anybody or promote anybody. The idea here is to learn. But this is a pretty common example that we see on sales proposals. So an Excel style table. So how would you advise this organization to improve their presentation? I want to invite the audience, chat in, what is your feedback? And then we're going to ask Mark and Patrick to do the same. What would you do? Is this ideal? Is there things that we could do to make it better? So if you have thoughts on it, please chat it in now.
Interesting.
I think people are waiting for you two to weigh in. So go ahead. Yeah.
So you've seen this, Marcus, sounds like. Yeah.
I have. I can tell you though what my first impression was, which was like my first impression here was I felt like the salesperson has like the total cost for leads is like basically $20,000, and the total cost for like account enrichment is basically $1,000. And I feel like the salesperson wanted to get to that number. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like they're like, we're gonna
like how do I back
but we're gonna give you 111 leads. Like as in like they would have given us 100 leads for $200 a lead, rather than now they're giving us 111, or like it felt like that's the number they wanted to get to, was that, but it was this sort of complicated roundabout way of doing it. I would say that like there is this is one that it does make me like, you do sort of have to have some degree of like thinking about what this is. And I suppose the other one here is also
I have to do math.
But it's also one where like, if I want to play around with this, and this is me getting into, like into the Quiller zone here. But if I want to play around with this and I'm like, well, what would this look like if we went like, up a level or did
300 leads? Yeah.
What if I want to do like 500 here? Like, what's going on? How do I play around with that? I think that's one.
Yeah.
It's a bit funny. What strikes you, mate?
Yeah, I think my issue, and obviously, like I actually don't know the company, and I don't know exactly. I'm sure there was like a conversation before you got this, but I'm struggling with like, what exactly am I buying, right? And and this is a big thing with pricing, is like someone's commenting like it's not easy to read, and it's like, yeah, like there's some hierarchy issues, like what's my total, like they're using underlines and stuff. But I think the bigger thing is like, don't confuse your buyers. Like when I go to a pricing page, even if we've had conversations, I should understand exactly what I'm getting for how much, like within a few seconds of being on that page. I shouldn't have to like have like some sort of a compass on a map in order to try to figure out like exactly what I'm paying for. And like, after like looking at this for 30 seconds, I'm like, oh, okay, so I get 111 leads for this price. And then I get this enrichment thing. But that's my first thing that's like super helpful, I think, to the audience here. I think one of the other things is like, a really simple way to clean this up is like these discount lines, make it one line, right? So just put 10, cross it out, $9, right? Like 200, cross it out, put right next to it 180, because then all of a sudden that just simplifies things. And it's like these two things. And then one other thing to think about, like you mentioned the salesperson. I wonder, it's probably not right, but I wonder if there's some sort of a spiff of like, oh, if you sell enrichment, like you get an extra like accelerator, because it's so small relative to the deal size, or maybe they're trying to juice their numbers and separate this out. I mean, there's a world where like you get the leads without the enrichment and that's what you want, but there's also a world where like it makes absolutely no sense to buy these leads without enrichment. And if that's the case, just put everything into one line. Unless there's an advantage to separating it out, but given the proportions, it feels like this is a sales driven decision or breakout, rather like you were kind of alluding to, rather than like what makes sense for the customer to read it kind of a thing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
strongly agree that like also like the discount thing is sort of like you're sort of being like, so wait, what am I? Anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So let me share with you. My console just went away here. Let me share with you how Quiller redesigned it. So this example, exact same offer. So it's still using the brand colors with the green and the black, but now you can see this was transformed into an interactive pricing model where now the customer, like you were saying, Mark, can change the number of leads that they want, and you can see the price change. Patrick, like you were saying, the discount is now presented off to the side.
I know we had access to the slides beforehand, but I definitely didn't realize that I was saying exactly that. That's great. That's awesome.
And you can see the prices changing. Yeah,
that's great. The dynamism is great.
Yeah.
I think even so, like, I mean, I think like, okay, yes, lovely plug for Quiller here. And I think like interactive, I think showing the discount off is worthwhile. And you can even do things in Quiller, like with the total, you can sort of have a little extra part there to show total discount off as well. And other sort of things like that. I mean, I still even think that like, even on that side, it does feel like, I think Patrick, to your point, like, that simple thing of being like the description on that slide that you had there, Sarah, was like, the description was much clearer about what value was being added. The sub description field was like, also like, again, like to remind you, yes, you're probably reading this in the context of a broader document, but just like lead generation campaign, blah, 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 selected criteria, all this various sort of things like that. Like, I think like, being able to sort of bring, you need to, there are people when you're doing pricing, this is a small thing, but like, there are people who are going to be chatting to you, who are going to be like, who are going to be approving this sale or being involved in this process, who are just going to be flicked a proposal or flicked a deck, who are going to jump straight to the price. And that you want to give them the relevant amount of like context, clarity, and understanding. Like if someone, like, again, if someone's coming to buy your product on the website, there'll be people who are just like, they send the link to the pricing page. And if your pricing page doesn't like give context and clarity, it's like who you are and what you do and why it's good. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you're missing a trick, because I think there are people who come in like in low context environments to sort of who want to be able to sort of make an answer, make a decision, and sort of be informed, like, pretty quickly on that sort of side as well.
Got it. No, it's good. That's really interesting. Yeah. I think that's another thing, is just like constantly reinforcing value. I think that's huge. Just something to think about. Definitely just something to think about.
Oh, good. Okay. I've once again lost my console here.
All good.
Sorry.
How's everyone doing? As Sarah finds her console, how are we doing? We still fired up? We enjoying pricing?
This may be the perfect time if you have a question or a Q&A or something that you want to fire it in. Yeah. Well, literal fire with that one.
Good.
Nice.
Good. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get this back, but all right. So the next example I'm going to attempt to share here is is a tiered example, which we had a question of how many tiers is ideal. So I'm sorry.
I think so. It's okay. I mean, I can picture it in my head. So I think the next slide, just for everyone in the audience at home, is a standard SaaS pricing slide that goes from, I think, free, and then there's 5 tiers all the way from the cheapest to most expensive on that sort of side. And so Patrick, just like, I'm sure you've seen pricing of all different types and stripes over the time. Like, just to go back to Jeffrey's question here, how many good, better, best is the classic line out there in SaaS land. Some people, say just, roll with that. Some people go higher. Do you have an opinion here? Like, I'm sure context matters so much, but I do wonder if there is something right here.
So the thing is like good, better, best is like the equivalent of Columbus discovered America, right? It's actually like a lot more complicated, right? Like they tell you that in, you know, third grade, and then in high school you realize, well, actually the Vikings might have come over, and then there was like a Native American population. Like it's a lot more complicated when you get more sophisticated in your knowledge. And so I think the thing to keep in mind is like good, better, best goes back to the point we were talking about with like making sure that you have tiers that align to the different types of personas that you have. And so it's really like that's kind of the answer. Like the answer is like you should have tiers specifically for the number of users. Now there's a point where it gets too complicated, right? So like in this example, I know the company, but I won't state it because I think we're trying not to state the company. Like I would argue what they should do is like, this is the right number of tiers maybe for their customers, but it's a little hard to look at, right? So what I would do is I would take that free tier, I would pull that out and make that a call out kind of like across the entire length of the page. And that's kind of like its own separate thing. And then I have my paid tiers down below, and it makes it a little bit easier to kind of look at. And then also notice some things that they do really, really well though, is like, notice how the top of the, like the flowers and stuff like that, on the far left, you have like just a sprout. All the way on the right, you have a forest, and it gets progressively bigger, and they have the sprout blossom garden estate forest, right? Like these are little things that actually like, they seem a little corny or a little cliche, but they're actually really powerful because I want to come to this page and realize where do I stand as quickly as humanly possible. So I want to know that this one's bigger than this one. And then what you can see very small is like they have on each of these tiers, perfect for small teams, perfect for growing teams, perfect for larger teams. That's a really, really good call out because one, no one really wants to be small. So I automatically might look at the higher tier. But two, all of a sudden I might be like, oh, I'm not a large team. I don't need this tier. I need this tier, right? So again, when I come to this page, I want to be able to make a decision. I would say on average, most subscription companies have, I mean, a better way to answer is probably 2 to 5 tiers. The way they present it varies, and you want to make that more elegant than less, obviously. So that's kind of a way to look at it. Fun fact, actually, before I shut up for a second, the average, like the highest, fastest growing mobile app subscriptions have an average of 13 tiers, but a user never sees more than like 3 tiers over their lifetime. So all of their users come in on a single tier. And this is a really good lesson because your pricing goes beyond that first purchase. They all come in on a single tier, and then based on their behavior, they get shown other premium tiers. So all of a sudden you might see 3 tiers over a lifetime, even though there's 13, you're not going to see all of them. And then you start with a really simple thing because there's only so much real estate on a phone. So it's just kind of a lesson that like, it's a multi-move game. You want to make sure it's easy to understand, but more tiers are your friend as long as you kind of follow some of those pieces.
That is super fascinating.
Good. That's great feedback. And, you know, I want to just do a call out here. If you want your pricing presentation reviewed for free by Patrick, chat that into us.
Yeah.
You know, send us a URL or email it to me or email your sales proposal. That's what tomorrow's session at 4:30 Eastern time is all about. So you get to ask Patrick your pricing presentation, and we'll also be doing a live review. And we promise, you know, nobody's going to be embarrassed. And our goal is to learn here. And if you prefer that we block out your company name, we can do that. So please send us your submissions, and you'll get some live feedback tomorrow. The only caveat is you do need to attend a session to get that feedback. So
totally happy to help.
Yeah, let's move on because we are quickly running out of time, and I want to get to the last 2 mistakes. So mistake number 4 is not taking advantage of upselling opportunities. So, you know, Patrick and Mark, talk to us about how much revenue should you be getting from upselling, or I've often heard it called upserving, which is kind of an interesting angle to position it too. But what are your thoughts on upselling?
I mean, I suppose my one will be a sort of quick one. I mean, yeah. So first, an anecdote. So Patrick, do you know like Sahil and the Gumroad sort of team? Yeah. So I remember talking to Sahil like way back in the day when they were first getting started. So Gumroad allows you to sell things on the internet, just like a simple link, and you can sort of, you know, have buying there. And they sort of turned on this ability to sort of have upsell. And it was just one of those ones that the average basket size across all accounts, this is an obvious thing, but it's like, if your average basket size was $30 and then all of a sudden you start offering upsell, like your average basket size obviously can only go up because some people will select to have that upsell component. And I think they sort of found that on average, people who used upsell versus those who didn't saw an uplift of like, I think it was like 9% or whatever. That is found money. That is just like, there's just money on the ground that is like sitting there. But if you don't have an easy, friendly, like, ability to sort of quickly add that sort of extra thing, I think you're sort of missing a trick. I also think, again, to the concept of like understanding like what the buyer values, like having an insight into like what they care about, what they want, what they're sort of eager for. We've got plenty of times that people, come on and say like, hey, do you know what? I thought I was interested in this cheaper tier, but actually now that I'm coming to the buying day, I just, for whatever reason, I want to have this more expensive one. And you know what? I also I don't want this optional extra, but I do want this one. And I think just having that ability to sort of go through there. Now, I think like there's ones that are very like buyer driven, where it's like, they're just on a page making a choice. There's ones where it's very sales driven, where there's a salesperson sort of, trying to sort of encourage you to sort of have more usage here. There's also ones that come, obviously, there's upselling with time, which I won't get too much into. But I really do think that like, if you look across this zone, and we have data on this in Quiller, because Quiller allows for upselling, it's one of those things that there is this sort of ability to sort of increase your average basket size like very, very easily just by having it there as an option.
Just by asking, just literally by asking for something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah. No, and I think at the end of the day, I think it's one of those things. A lot of people, like, they're scared again to ask for some sort of upsell, right? Because they're like, I'm just going to try to get the deal. And it's like, it doesn't cloud things too much. You can make it a very simple, like, and think of, again, priority support, I always come back to, because anyone can provide priority support, right? Like, it's not something that's more difficult. You don't have to change systems. You don't really have to increase your costs. You just have to change who you answer first, right? And I think that, as I said before, add-ons, one of the most underutilized aspects of all pricing, because you already got someone committed, get them committed a little bit more, right? And that's where that 9% came from. And yeah, I think to kind of add a little bit of an exclamation point here, like, also keep in mind that like upsells come after the initial sale as well, right? And so what we found, and this is very subscription focused, but the fastest growing subscription companies out there, 20% or more of their revenue in a given month comes from their existing customer base, meaning essentially those individuals are paying more for other stuff, upsells, different products. They're using more of the product in particular. In most companies, it's pretty close to zero. So it's one of those things where like you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of those folks who really like you and having them buy more stuff from you, essentially.
Good. Okay, let's go into our final mistake. So set it and forget it. Our product changes, we release new things, we make updates all the time, and yet so often our price doesn't change. We keep it static. So the question is, how often should you be changing your price or reviewing it? So Patrick, kick us off. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, honestly, and this is going to be shocking to a lot of people, you should be updating something about your pricing once every 3 months. Wow. It doesn't mean you're changing your price once every 3 months. It doesn't mean that you're raising prices on customers. Everyone thinks it's the number. There's so many things around the number that you can optimize. And that's really what you should be focused on. Now, if that's completely insane to you, just start with once every 6 months doing some sort of an experiment. And you're probably maybe 1 6-month period, you skip it, and then you end up doing it again. So you do it once a year kind of a thing. It's one of the 3 main growth levers in your business, and most people are not using it at all. They're mostly just focused on obviously acquiring new customers, which, don't get me wrong, is really important. But if you can acquire more customers at a larger value, like, it's something that's, super, super powerful.
Very good.
I mean, I think, like, just thinking back on Quiller, I mean, we definitely went through a phase where we changed it too often. Like, we were like, let's optimize price, and like we sort of, yeah. And I think it can be like a real distraction, and I think it can cause weirdness with customers and weirdness with your team, and also, like, I don't know, like, there are, like, to really go and change pricing, like, there are like engineering costs and like just internal operations costs that are things that you're deferring spending on other resources. And we had periods where we did multiple price changes, over the course of, 18 months. We had other periods where we sort of let it be for like quite a long period of time. And I think that like you definitely, I would say that like, I think you should be, if you haven't made any changes to your pricing in a year, I think you've probably made a mistake. If you're doing like multiple like big reviews per year, and I'm not saying what Patrick's saying where you're making adjustments or you're adding a new thing to a certain tier or you're sort of doing a bit of repositioning. I think it's like there is a right sort of zone here. And I think there was definitely a period in my time where I was trying to over optimize on price, where like really at a certain point, it's like you're kind of fiddling with the margins here. There's a diminishing set of returns past a certain point. To be honest, like the main thing you need to do once you have some degree of success is like, okay, can I build an engine around this to like go and drive like lots more, volume through it in startup land if you're trying to, become 10x the size. I think the pricing thing though, if you're trying to become 10x the size, the pricing thing, if you're not being thoughtful about it on some regular schedule, that's going to influence like, I don't know, at least 5, 10, maybe 15% or more of that uplift growth. And it's like, it's one of those important, like building a great marketing machine, building a great sales machine, building like a viral engine or some sort of PLG or whatever, pick your like sort of trope of the moment in growth land. If you don't include price in that, you're like, obviously, I think massively missing a trick. And so I do think that like customers expect it. I suppose like one thing that I'd be interested to hear from your side, Patrick, is like, what's your view on inflation? Because like right now we are living in a world where like, I think for the first time in a long time, like most people, we've all kind of the last X years, we've lived in a world of like 1 to 2% inflation. And so everyone kind of views prices as being, going up over time, but reasonably static. That's not where we are right now. And I know that, and I think there's something sort of funny going on around like how companies should be thinking about price. Like I'm not sure if everyone should be jacking their price by 10%, but maybe, I don't know.
I think the issue, so it's a good thought. I think the issue is like, just not even getting into like the economy and will this subside or will it remain? That's from a first principle standpoint, raising prices based off inflation, it's not going to be much. If you're going to raise price, you should do it more than inflation. Let's say inflation's 5 to 10%. You want 20% increases. You don't want, because you want to defend it with value. You don't want it to be because of, and then the second thing I was about to say, like from a customer perspective, oh, your costs went up, so my costs go up. That doesn't make sense. Like, doesn't feel good, right? Like, you know what I mean? And that's why like people who do cost pricing, it's like, oh, like I see I know every time I see a price increase email, it starts with something along the lines of like, oh, like the cost of everything is going up. It's like, I know it's a disaster. I know that company's going to be dealing with a disaster because I don't care about your costs, right? Like I care about my value, right? And so, and so it might gain you some sympathy, but it doesn't really gain you like, the advantage you want. And so I think that what I hope that the inflation pressures causes a company to go, oh, we should think about raising our prices. How much should we raise it? Not inflation or what we estimate inflation to be, but we should raise it of, oh, we haven't changed our prices in 6 years. You probably could raise your price by 25, 30%. Some of the best companies out there, they're raising prices every year by much more than inflation. And so you got to back it up with value. Your NPS probably has to be at least over 20, but NPS of 20 isn't even that great, right? And so I think it's just one of those things to really think about it and use it as a spark to have the conversation about what you should do rather than like a guide of like how much you should raise your price by.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the other thing I'll just say, like, and this is just an anecdotal thing, and I'm interested, to hear your thoughts. I know we're at time here, but I'm on a whole bunch of founder WhatsApp threads and Slack groups and whatever else. And a thing that I do hear a lot is people were very hesitant to raise prices during a pandemic. People were kind of like, I'm not, there was a deferring of you might have played around with price on the margins and done a few things here or there or whatever, but like people were kind of not really looking to that as a strategy as much in 2020, 2021. And not that the pandemic is like over and everything has been like totally solved, but like, you know, the world is transitioning back to some degree of, you know, normalcy. And I think that, you know, a lot of people are looking at this. And so again, it's another sort of funny sort of catch up effect of this last few years as well. I think that there are a bunch of companies who've kind of deferred it for a while and now it's coming through. So it's interesting times. Anyway, sorry, random tangent at the end. I've got an economist on the call. What am I going to do? Not ask him economic questions?
No, I think pricing sits at the intersection of uncomfortable and important. Whenever you have something that's in that intersection, you avoid doing anything about it, right? And so I think use these as sparks. I think the pandemic, I mean, maybe the first like 4 weeks when we had no idea, but like for a lot of companies that weren't affected at all, it was like an excuse not to do anything. I know plenty of companies who raised prices throughout the pandemic, right? And they weren't gouging or anything like that. It's just, it's as you said, it's a very emotional thing, and humans are just funny creatures, and that's what makes pricing so interesting.
I love that, the intersection of uncomfortable and important. So bottom line is pricing is important and the conversation is continuing. So just a reminder, tomorrow we are continuing this conversation. We're allowing you to ask any question of our pricing expert, Patrick Campbell. We're giving you the opportunity to send us your proposal. You can email it to me, you know, chat in a URL, whatever you want to do, just send us your stuff. We'll give you some feedback, but we are out of time today. So I want to thank our speakers. Mark, Patrick, thank you so much. Wonderful conversation, great insights shared. You know, I learned a lot today and I'm sure our audience did as well. So thank you very much. Thank you to our audience. We never take your time for granted. We appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Both Quiller and ProfitWell are committed to your sales success. So again, we want to continue talking with you about this important pricing topic tomorrow. Plus, we do have some free resources for you, a couple of pricing playbooks, some strategies, and some information on tiered pricing, especially since there was some interest around that. So be watching for your email. But otherwise, this is it for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. And this has been a great time.